This is Motivation. I'm Lori Joy Kingwell.
And I'm Chrissy Van. We're two dreamers on two wheels inspired by our community.
And celebrating the voices we're just lucky enough to discover along the ride. So if not already, like, subscribe, follow along, do what you gotta do to not miss an episode.
Imagine you're riding a motorcycle, the wind in your face, the road stretching endlessly before you. But as you ride, tiny bugs begin to splatter against your visor. Each one starts as a small agitation, but then they start to build up and collect and collect. One more thing on the mile-long to-do list, messages coming in at all hours of the day, constant pull to do more, be more. Felt right. Soon, the clear view you once had is obscured. Just like those bugs on the motorcycle visor, our lives can get clouded by the ceaseless flurry of events and emotion. And it's in these moments that everything starts to feel agitated, and clarity seems like a distant dream. The lens through which we view our world becomes stained, making it harder to see the path ahead. But here's where we take a moment. We need to take steps and recognize the need to pull over, to step away from the chaos. It's time to clear that visor and take the time to regain a perspective that's unclouded by the fight, flight, or freeze response. In this episode, we'll learn how to pause, breathe, and look at our situations through a clear prefrontal cortex. We're not just surviving, we're thriving. We'll explore strategies, stories, and conversations that help us re-examine our thoughts, reframe our challenges, and rediscover the joy of a journey viewed through a clear lens. This is the Motivation.
We're talking about this today because this was just me. And I'm just coming out on the other side of it. And I thought, as Chrissy and I usually do with our episodes that you and I talk, we're like, when things are taking place in our life, and whether we're just like really in it or we're on the other side of it, I'm like, let's talk about it. Because if
you're
it's
not the
us,
only one.
yeah. And if it helped us in any capacity, or we felt alone in it for ourselves, we're like, let's talk about it. Let's see if anything else resonates with anyone else. I know for a fact that this will, because the reality of it is that we're taking in information at a pace that we never have as human beings before. Once we really had the internet and we had social media and all those different things, we have access to everywhere, the planet, right? Everyone, everywhere, in a million different facets. And so we're seeing pictures of people's lives in a way that we never saw before. So, our nature to compare is there. So it feels that like I'm not doing enough, I'm not being enough, the enough that we spoke to in the intro, the more. And then you also have the accessibility that we have. I remember even when we had cell phones, we didn't carry them around everywhere we went. And we do now, and messages and phone calls. You have people that get quite upset if you don't answer the phone right away or you don't get back to them right away. There's this entitlement to our beings, ourselves. And so this input that's coming in at a rate that we haven't evolved yet to be able to process at the pace in that it's coming in. And our nervous systems are getting kicked up like never before. Anxieties, depression, all these different things, mental health wise, are at an all-time high. And I had it was 7 months, I guess. And it was a beautiful, magical, in many ways, 7 months, because there was all these really, really fun, expansive trips and mini trips, big trips, all the above. It was like my year of play. I was coming and moving through grief, as well as stepping into this really playful space of just, I'm alive. I'm going to just fully live that out. A lot of goals and moving towards those. And so it wasn't anything in which I was trying to escape or run away. I was deliberately making these plans. I was very, very conscious of what I was doing throughout, even like making sure my daily practice was there as much as possible. There's always those um, not slip ups, I would say, but where consistency gets hard when you're traveling or whatever it is. But I did a pretty decent job of that, and journaling, gratitude, all those different things to keep me very centered and and clear in where I was going, and what I was doing. But it didn't change the fact that I was around a shit ton of people at all times. I was still doing, you know, my business, our podcast stuff, family stuff, moving through, selling of my auntie. There was a million things that were happening, and so the input was enormous. And it was bugs on the screen. I could feel that I was in a more of a fight, flight, or freeze state of mind. Why I say that is my nervous system was going into survival mode. So I was seeing everything through, we already have like the negativity bias, but I was seeing everything through the lens of a subtle threat. So like even people being around me or talking within my vicinity felt like an intrusion upon me, an offense to me. And I knew that I didn't feel that way about people. I love people. I knew that I didn't feel that way about my life, but everything felt very intrusive, and I felt very easily agitated, very easily annoyed, and I was kind of constantly running to be in a bedroom by myself, a bathroom by myself. I was just stealing this time away and alone. And so normally way back when, I would have just been like, people annoy the fuck out of me right now. And I wouldn't have really done much about it, just hoping the people would go away. Like, the people never go away. We're in society. I
Damn
now
billions of
know,
others.
yeah, I now know with my evolution of figuring out my own mental health, my own depression, my own anxiety, how much it really has to do with your nervous system as well, and how much that if you aren't taking the time to take care of that, that it will do its job, which is to protect you, which is to make sure that it's constantly looking for what is a threat, sort of thing, because it's kicked up. And so here's the thing that we really want to talk about today is whether it's on a big scale or a small scale, because I realize not everyone can create 2, 3 days where they just have solitude if they want to. But what I really want to put through to everybody today is the difference it can be, and I'll talk further about what mine look like, if there's anything in there that could be helpful for yourselves. But the noticing and the being aware and being really proactive about prioritizing that time to be able to process all the information and all the things that you're doing in a day. You might not be able to do that on a constant weekly, and we call it like the releasing of the valve. But even when you're releasing of the valve, life gets really busy. It's hard to have that capacity of real, or I say real, there is no real balance because it changes at all times. You're going through different spaces and places and experiences. But when that really is happening within you, the real necessary need to slow down, to stop, and to process the information and tell your nervous system and your limbic system, a tiger isn't chasing me. I'm okay. So that you can go back into your thriving brain so that you can see things from a clear state of mind. Because again, all of my interactions, all of my even choices, my creativity wasn't there. I couldn't see clearly. My goals were getting mucky because I was looking through survival. And when you're in survival, your brain's not open to creativity and learning. It's like, I don't have time for that. I'm just trying to keep your ass alive. And it's something in which I just really don't think that it's talked about enough. Yes, the like slow down, take time, but like quite literally of like the imperativeness of put the brakes on hard and put all of that energy and time into going into a quiet space so that you can come back out and live a healthy life, even if you go back into the race of it all, but that you have a capacity to do so. I'll stop it there before I go into the rest and let you talk, Chrissy.
Yes. Well, first of all, for people listening, I want to acknowledge something because I will say, as a listener, and I think of like friends that have kids that can't even get away for two
Mhm.
seconds in the current economic times that we live, there could be a lens that someone's listening and saying, poor her, she had trouble taking a moment to herself on her road trip. and being in Greece and traveling around. And I just want to acknowledge that it could sound that way to a degree. And we hear that. But at the same time, it shows that if you're in that state of mind, it doesn't matter what life is offering you in that present moment. Like the tools actually still need to take place because there's so much planning that goes into that. But you don't necessarily have that time and space. And that's why it's important to talk about. She's going to share the process that she took, but we're also going to acknowledge that not everybody has that luxury of taking a multi-day break. But it's
Yes.
like having that awareness within ourselves that you need to have it give somewhere in order to make sure that you're not operating in that lens.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that too, because that's the reality is like whether or not you yourself have created and it's all things you want to be doing for the most part, or else life is happening, which if you've listened to the episodes prior to that, the years prior to that, there was all the things happening that weren't the play, that weren't the where, you know, loved ones were sick. I was in a caretaking space, plus working 2 jobs, plus all the, kind of thing. And but this was still, whether or not you're creating your fun or whether or not you're in that stage or that place in life where it is like you're in the heartbeat of the tough stuff, or this is imperative. And whether it's you can take a couple of days or you say I need a half a day, this is where I really emphasize the priority of it. It's finding any little pocket, because you deserve that. You deserve to still feel like a human being in your thriving part of your brain, because that's where I say it goes to, it's like your nervous system is going to take care of you if you don't take care of it. And I recognize now where it's like this is a slippery slope. And so you have to pay attention. And so I knew I had these couple of days to myself where if I didn't want to, I didn't need to see anybody. I didn't need to be around anything at all. It was a Friday and a Saturday and half a Sunday. That's what it turned out to be. And so at first it was just, this is great. I'm going to have some quiet time. I'm going to have some alone time. And then I had that overwhelming feeling of like, what you're going to do is you're going to find things to fill it with. Because right now you're addicted, my system is addicted to picking up the phone. My system is addicted to doing it, filling it with one more thing. And so you will fill it with something. What do you actually need? Are you going to take full advantage of that? And so this
Can
is
I
where
take you one pause for a
yeah,
second
please
just because
do.
it's so relevant? I was telling you how I'm rereading Atomic Habits to start the new year because there's
Yeah.
certain things in my workflow I want to build in. I haven't yet. And so I think I just needed those reminders so that I actually do it. And even something as simple as me getting through this book, which I have a resistance toward because I know it's what I actually need to do right now. I've made it my non-negotiable. I do my 5-minute timer of meditation in the morning, and I can't look at my phone until I've read at least a chapter. And the amount of times in the first few days that my hand, oh, because it wants to go and grab it because you want to fill it. So just those automatic habits that we have to be like, I don't like this. This isn't what I want to do. And that resistance, you will start to grab or try and fill. So continue because I laughed at
Right.
myself even this morning ahead of this podcast, even though I'm days in that I almost was doing the same damn thing.
Right. Actually, in the Atomic Habits, they even reference, I'm going to say the line wrong, but he always speaks to, you won't rise to your intentions, you'll fall to your systems.
Yeah.
And so if I had this intention of I'm going to really make the most of this next couple of days without any game plan, any real strategy, I knew that I was going to waste it. And then it's here and gone. And it was like, I've got this, because it's not lost upon me how valuable 2.5 days are by myself. My husband and I both work from home. And so I don't have, well, I get out there socially. He does every blue moon, but it's usually with me. So like, I don't have space. I don't, that's just the reality. And so it's one of those things where I didn't want to waste it. And so I really took advantage of my knowledge of human behavior and really what what you can really do for yourself to help yourself and really leverage how, our body brain works optimally. And so what I recognize first and foremost is that I was looking through a survival state of mind. I was in that kind of fight, flight, or freeze somewhat stage in that, continuous stressor mode at that time. And so I knew that the first thing to do was to get in my body and out of my head and to calm that nervous system. And so I had made the plan of the very first day I was going to just only do things that brought me into my body. And it's not like you could shut your thoughts down. That's insanity to think you can. But what I can't what I was doing is you're doing enough things to be bringing yourself into to your body. You're at least giving yourself the optimal opportunity, right? To not have the rumination and the runaway thoughts. And again, the game plan of what that's going to look like. So I did a forest walk and right off the kick in the morning sort of thing. And
This was on the Saturday of
this is on the
thoughts or the
Friday.
Friday of on the Friday of body?
Yeah, body Friday. So right off early morning. And why early morning is because I didn't want to pass a lot of people in the forest. And then no earbuds, just the quiet. Already I noticed almost instantaneous the need for sound and noise. And so I was focusing on like the crunch of my boots, the birds, anything that was there. And um it was almost incessant for the first like 15 to 20 minute of just like, well, what about? And then no, we're having quiet time, Lori. What about just like a an instrumental soundtrack? No, Lori, we're gonna shush now. Okay, but maybe later if you could no. Like it was just the
You're like,
constant
"It's
back
on
and
mute."
forth. And then so that I recognized immediately how intense it had gotten, the input and the addiction to input at that point. And so once I finished kind of the walk, and even just the drive, I wasn't able to like listen to everything. And I like to get where I'm going in the vehicle. And so I made myself follow the slow lane and be okay with it. And I was
Oh,
just
for
like,
you, that's a big
it's a
one.
big one. It's a
If
huge
you've
one.
heard in our previous episodes, she has been a wild,
Oh
angry
yeah.
driver in her past.
Oh, and now it's not it's like 10% of the anger, but I still can't drive in this. Like I can't be in the slow lane. Get
But of
going. I need to
course.
get going. And so I was just constantly putting myself in a position where I just had to be in my body and not trying to get to a destination, not trying to get to the thing, do the thing, all the things. So the rest of the day included things like just um listening to instrumental music and dancing, just like being in my body, closing my eyes, just going with movement, breath work. It was everything from painting. What else was I doing? Orgasming with my vibrator. Like it was all these things that
That'll get you in your body.
that'll get you. And I would just move, and I was really in a place of listening. So I would just kind of be like, what do I do?
I have
Easier
a
as yeah.
question. As you were immersed, was there anywhere in your body that you could recognize like that survival mode, that feeling that you were having where it was culminating?
Mm, good question. Yeah, my
Yeah.
chest and my shoulders. And so I felt like that was, and it's funny because the more that I had the pull factor to call, oh, the other thing too, I don't even really enjoy the phone. I don't call. Also, I want to call everybody. It was like my brain and body were trying to find any excuse. They were like, but do you want to call today though? You should call so and so. And I was like, I don't even like the phone. What are you telling me to call people? But it was just but it was just this tightness in this of what are we doing here, Lori? What are we doing here? And most of it was quite enjoyable, but I found in the in between moments this incessant pull. And then it loosened and it loosened and it loosened as the day went. I felt drastically different by the end of one day. Like from the start of the morning till the end of the day, I can genuinely say that I felt drastically different. But that was because I was practicing all day in doing what I could to let my nervous system know that it's like, hey, you're safe, we're good. And I had to prioritize that over the pull factor and recognize that that's all that was. And it was like a bit like that weaning off, right? So also knowing that it was going to be really uncomfortable as much as it was going to be really enjoyable. Because that's the other thing too, is we go into it, be like, oh, this is going to feel so good. And you're like, yes, but it is really uncomfortable too. And and so the second day was focused on, now I could take input, now I could listen to things, um, specifically around not pod. I didn't listen to podcasts. It's specific. This specific guy Eddie something on YouTube, but he does
Eddie
essentially these
something?
Eddie something. Follow him. He does. He
Change
does
your
these
life.
change your life. He does. I'll find his real name. We'll put it in there. Essentially, he kind of journals and talks out loud of his journals, and he's very wise. And the point of it is, any of the input that I had, that I was taking in, I was very, very conscious of what I was taking in, the language I was taking in, the thoughts that I wanted to be thinking. And so I kind of scaffold. I was still doing things in my body that second day, but I was bringing this in at the same time. What was really cool about it was, all of a sudden, I started, like, the creativity started to come in, ideas started to come in, to the point where I almost couldn't keep up with it. Like, I was like, whoa, Nelly. I was like making voice recordings where I could and all these different things. But it was like, that's when I knew I had clicked back in to my prefrontal cortex, is when all of a sudden I started to, it was like, hey, there you are again. Second part of the day was reflection. And so I used prompted questions from a book I have, and just wrote and wrote and wrote. And not just reflective about how I was feeling now. They were a lot of questions of like, how do I see life? And what have I learned over the last 20 years or 30 years, that now how do I view the world? How do I view others? How do I view myself? What is my capacity and capabilities? And because I was now feeling safe, and now I was in a more generous mind space and viewpoint, and creativity is coming in, sort of thing, it really had put me on that space of like, I can re-enter. I can re-enter the world and be a participant that is bettering humanity rather than putting us in a more fearful paranoia, all the different things that we're really struggling with today. And like we said before, you might be like, I don't have 2 days. I don't have a space to go to. I don't have a place to go to. I also just, I don't have the time. And that's okay. That's okay. That it doesn't need to be that. I need that personally. That's more what I personally need. Therefore, I prioritize it and I figure it out. But and also, I've created a space where I can do that, right? You know what I mean? Where we said today, you go, I'll stay. I wanted to go home in many ways and visit family and be there and all the above, but I knew that this needed priority. So I was going to have a bit of FOMO because I missed out on some like really dope shit with my in-laws and my family. But I knew that it needed to be done. But there's so much that can be done, um, and needs to be. I don't even know if can's the right word, needs to be, because again, we go to socioeconomic situations, we go to having kids, all those different things. um, but if you look at the usage of your phone, and if you look at how many hours and minutes that accumulate to hours that you spend on your phone in a week, um, and it's not to say don't go on your phone, it's not to say don't do those things. I'm just saying, the proof is in the pudding, that everybody everywhere can create space to go, rather than pick up the telephone or pick up the thing, to go say, okay, for the I'm feeling it, I'm feeling so kicked up. And so I'm going to prioritize the uncomfortable um work, and what's the other word, inconvenient work. And whether that's locking yourself in a bathroom, you're back actually better off if you have kids. Don't do the bathroom. They always find you in the bathroom. It's like a beacon. If you go to the bathroom, they immediately like knock knock and what are you doing? Are you pooping? I know this from working with kids, being a nanny, and like all the things. Um, Whether that's sitting in your car, just going out and sitting in your car. If you don't have a car, if you go walk around the block, I believe it's a real necessity that we really look at in our lives today more than ever.
Well, and you nail it when you say it's the same. Obviously, I advocate a lot for health and fitness, and you get the same excuses about people prioritizing movement. And one of the number one reasons why people don't is I don't have time. And if you actually do an audit, exactly as you say, with hours on the phone, I can almost guarantee maybe there is like this minimal, and I mean probably under a percent of people that are like, nah, not me, my hours of usage way down. But like the majority of human beings, you can find your time right there. And for myself, that's an industry that I work in. So I'm a heavy phone user. However, anyone that knows me knows that airplane mode is one of my best friends. And I don't make any bones about it. When I go and I take off, it's like legitimate offline time. I have rules over using my phone at night. Like if my husband and I are hanging out, there's a certain time I will no longer respond to you. And it's nothing personal. It's because I need to take that time and space, and those are small intentional moments. Like that is the tiny sliver of an example of what Lori is speaking to, because you may not actually be able to carve out that day or that half morning, but there's also ways to keep yourself in check. It kind of goes back to the fact that I'm reading Atomic Habits again, but everything is that 1% better every day. You can do that same type of philosophy in your life of like, if I can only take a percent of my day, let's say you're that one person where 99% of your day, you have no choice and there's absolutely zero way you could prioritize yourself, which again, I highly doubt that is actually the case. But let's say, then take that 1% and actually do it. And to be honest, even when taking that 1%, that's when you're going to realize to what Lori's speaking to is yes, taking those moments. It sounds so nice in mental theory, but you actually will end up observing your addiction to all the things that we use to fill the time and space.
Without a doubt.
I shared really honestly, end of August, first panic attack in many years. I hadn't had one since 2014. I now recognize a lot more because it's the running joke, but I injured myself in May and didn't realize how much that pain and inflammation and chronic pain every day was impacting how my body operated, how I showed up. I was operating very much unlike myself because my nervous system was so kicked up. And then on top of it, I really wasn't recognizing something that I needed to recognize in my working life. And it all came to a head and became really obvious. And for myself, culminated very much in my solar plexus. It was through the Women's Moto Summit. I was like blindly aware of what I was holding in my body, had like this earth shattering energy release in a big way, which again, that's what's going to happen if you don't release the valve. It was like a very prolonged affair. And as I've spoken to on here now, the realization coming out on the other side of that was the work ain't done. It just started.
Hmm.
It just fucking started. And Lori was kind enough because she was traveling back home and gave me a pair of keys and I had access to her place. And same thing, I just live with my husband and he is very social. So I do get time and space to myself, but it was almost like I needed, and it was like this beautiful benefit to have a different physical space that I knew when I walked into, put my phone on airplane mode. They were so kind, set up an easel. I am somebody that just discovered they like art. I'm not great at it. I just love to like swish a paintbrush and my brain completely disengages. They have this incredible view. I was able to like stare at the sunrise or the sunset. And the only time I grabbed my phone was when it was the most ridiculous sunset and I was dancing with hummingbirds. And I felt like Lori needed to know that that happened.
Yeah.
'Cause I was so awestruck. I was just like, this is for you too. But it was like the difference that I had, and it wasn't just those few days. Like I was in a state that I communicated to friends and family that I'm just taking some quiet time right
Hmm.
now. I greatly reduced my social interactions. I spent more time having my baths again. I had my journal. And when the thing that resonated with me most for you, Lori, when you were sharing this experience was like the creative block that you had when you were operating in survival state. And I was having the same issue. And then I was adding to the panic because I was like, fuck, everything I need to do needs to be creative. And then you have this tremendous block. And so I was doubling down and feeling the weight of that on top of everything. But like actually carving those spaces to mindfully, like to be so mindful and to pay attention and to listen. When I talk about like that feeling in my stomach of not aligning, for example, in something in my work life, I actually didn't solve or change that problem too much right now. I just have a broader awareness of it, and so I know how to navigate and move with it right now, because that's the reality. Some things in life you can't just snap a finger and it changes, but the awareness allows us to decide, what role am I going to play in this? How do I want to show up in this if I am to walk alongside this? It's made a world of difference. And then what happened once I had those weeks of pause, because then it was full tilt. I saw my family, which we know I love them dearly, but can be very triggering because of situations that are happening there. I was at a conference. Those are always exhausting and full tilt. And I thrived. And that creative flood truthfully hasn't stopped because the work hasn't stopped in between. But because of taking that time and implementing the same tools along the way, I've been able to keep myself in flow state. And trust me, I know it will happen. The wheels will start turning, and more than likely, I'm going to reach a point where I have to check myself again. But will I allow it to get to the same level that it did for this last one? Probably not. Never say never. Humans are are known for making the same mistakes, but you're able to catch yourself a
Yeah.
lot earlier if you stay in that state of awareness.
And I think on paper, we look at things a lot of times, our lives, and we're like, this is sustainable. And what we don't realize is that
I'm the
mental
master of
health
that. This is
wise,
fun.
right? Mental health wise, it's not. And it's subtle. Like we think it's these big giant breaks, but like they had a mental breakdown, but it's like it's these subtleties that seep into how you show up in your work, in your loved ones' lives, the tone of voice that you have when you answer them, the how you they say something to you, and it's the way in which you hear it, and then how it sits with you, and then how you all the different, like, it just slowly layers itself, and
They
then
all
you
become
start
the bugs. They
they all
all become the
become
fucking
they do,
bugs.
and then you can't see clearly. All you can see is this messiness on your screen, and everybody's in your way, and you can't, and it's those things, if that's not there's more than one truth that's taking place, and we cannot, it's just, there's no way around it, that we can't expect the world outside of ourselves to pretzel itself in a way so that we aren't triggered because we're in a survival state. But again, having that contrast and that awareness of, oh, I'm doing that thing where I'm only seeing through this lens. And it was only lasted about a week or two. And I was very upfront. I'd say out loud to people, I would say, I'm trying to not be, I got 2 weeks till alone time. So I'm really trying not to be around humans right
We
now.
recorded one like this. You showed up to my
Yeah.
place and you're like, this is
Like I
the
was
exception
on
to
it.
the rule, but you get what you
Yeah.
get.
You get what you get. Cause I was being very honest, where I was like, this is a me thing. This is a me thing. This is what I have a capacity for. It's not anybody else. This is all me. And so I was being as honest as I could everywhere that I could when I was having interactions, not as an excuse, but as full transparency. I was doing the best that I could with knowing that my nervous system was on fire. And that's the reality, is like, you can't just say hear no evil, see no evil when this is taking place. And that's why I also say it's not really a choice. We think it's a choice, we pretend it's a choice, but ripple effects into all these avenues and areas of your life, and it can really make a mess of things. It can really, your intention is to live this really whole life and this well-being, and I hate to use that happiness word because it can get so distorted. Joyful, complex but joyful ultimately. And the reality of it is that you can't do that if you're in survival state. It's an impossibility. And you
Well,
have
you
to
say nervous system
yeah.
on fire. If you leave something on fire, what happens? It
House
burns the
burns
fuck
down,
down.
down. Yeah. Now more than ever, ever, because I can't state it enough, is like we've never been here before where we've had to process information input at the rate that we do. And we have had no time as a species to evolve to where we need to be in our mental capacity. And so you think of even like a computer, if you open too many tabs, if you have them running for too long, your computer freezes. You gotta shut that shit down. You gotta reboot it. You gotta let it sleep. Prepare to
I used to say to people all the time, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm just like operate like I have 12 Google tabs open all at once." Ha ha. Ha. Like that used to be
Yeah.
something that I would say and just like
So
laugh
there
it
it
off.
is.
Like, how hilarious am I?
Yeah.
And then I was like, wait a second, that's a choice to operate that way.
It
Like,
is.
it took me a
And
long time to realize that was a choice, that I could shut some tabs and that I shouldn't wear that as a badge of honor, because not only are we not equipped, but I also think the more doing that we do, we start to wear it like that's a badge of honor. And I think that's also a byproduct of what we're exposed to, because it gives this illusion. You know, a dear friend of ours who's in the thick of motherhood right now nailed it on the head of saying, how can we expect moms to like take those moments for themselves and feel like they're doing it right when all they're exposed to is somebody with a perfectly polished house and a happy baby and all of this, and in any facet of your life you can see that comparable and feel I am not enough.
mhm, mhm. And I think that's it too, is like we're then also looking on the outside to see what everyone else is doing, to see if my life makes sense, if I'm doing all the things that makes a life worthy of being. And this is also what we're talking about today, is the opportunity to quiet that and to go inwards, and then to have the listening, because I didn't have ideas because I was inspired by somebody else. I didn't have ideas because I was witnessing something on social media. And when I was having those moments of clarity and when I was having those moments of aha, it was coming from, obviously everything's highly influenced by the information you've taken in, but it was as close to me speaking to me in those moments. It feels different. Like I there's like a warmth, there's like a knowing when it genuinely feels like your spirit's talking to you versus your head's
Mhm.
talking to you. There's a calmness, there's a quietness, there's a gentleness, there's a lovingness that is just different. And the only really way to get access to that is to have those quiet spaces and times. And not just in 2 days, but sometimes you need like a real, you know, essentially, fast of the brain, fast of the nervous system, fast of the immune system. Like I needed to fast it all. And after our big weekend at the moto show, I found this is actually, and it makes sense because we were working 12-hour days for 3 days straight, and we had the energy of hundreds of people. Our energy was up. we were
And
we
like
were
the lead up
on.
was very short, so there was like
Lots of
not
stuff
really
to
slowing
do.
getting into it.
Yeah, so there was a lot going on, and actually, this is the week to follow that I've noticed my nervous system's like buzz. So doing a quiet walk a little bit yesterday, and making time where I could spending an extra couple minutes in the shower, just focusing on the water hitting my body, sort of thing. Because I haven't had the time to. It's not like I could take 2 days right now to be like I'll go back in again. It's I'm we're all both, you and I, with all the flexibility that we have some big goals and big dreams, and we're working really hard to meet those. And so, again, we're on here at 7:30 a.m.
And it's not that you want to be so regimented that life is regimented, but at the same time, you're like, these things serve you. Like, I compare it to the gym, the amount of times people are like, ugh, like, I have to do this. Like, they serve you. And eventually, when you have
Yeah.
that recognition of just how far that propels you, it doesn't feel like work anymore. You're doing the work, but it doesn't feel like work.
Yeah. Yep. So let's get our
So
song
before she
going.
gets more specific,
Ovation
motivation.
man.
Motivations. Beautiful. Get specific.
So the specifics. if you had to break, like really get the bare minimum, if you get home and in the car, sit in the car and just like set your timer for 5 minutes. It's going to be uncomfortable. You're going to have to prioritize it. You're going to have to decide even what that looks like ahead of time and just like sit in the quiet of your car and just be in a state of noticing. But have something where at the very least start at once a week and move it up to a couple times a week. If you have a crazy schedule, make it so that like that's what I do every day, and if you do have space and time, or you can see a reality in which you're like, I could ask for a day. I could do a day where I go stay at a hotel, or I just say to my partner and to whoever it is, hey, could you be out of the house for like a solid 12 hours? And then you plan those 12 hours to just draw, to just move your body, dance around the house, all those different things. But you take it, prioritize it, schedule it. Because we schedule unwilling or unwitting, not unwillingly, willingly, but like unconsciously, we constantly are actually, what, oh, I'm gonna go on my phone when, I'm gonna do this when. And I know it's like that's my only time to just disappear, but I'm like, what you don't realize is you're actually, the thing that you're looking to escape into, step away from, is actually only increasing the stress once you come back in, and increasing that overwhelming feeling to want to then escape again. And the only other point that I want to make that I didn't earlier is that we also say, like, again, we don't have the time, we don't have the space, but once you have the clarity, because your brain is moving slower when it's in survival, or I shouldn't say slower, it's hyper focusing. And so therefore you get caught
It's
up more,
aroused.
it's aroused. And so you're not able to have that clearer thinking, which you spoke about. And you're actually saving more time because you can make decisions easier, clearer, all those different things. You can become more, uh, yeah, you actually save time coming out of it because you're not getting, all agitated and flustered and in your head and deceive all the things. So you actually save time by going in and prioritizing that time as well. But like fit it in micro moments. And if you can, get a glob of it.
I love
That's
that.
a
Micro
scientific
moments
term,
club.
glob.
I want to get to mine, but we've updated the motivation.com and slowly adding more components to that space. But what I really think that we should do, Lori, is have a book club space of all the reads
Mm.
that have really helped us. And I'm just curious, for those that have a glob and want to do some of this work, what would be your pick of a read that would help them really understand how to get into their body? Because I know that you were saying, like, leading into it.
Yeah. I would say one of the best books is oh gosh, how my
I
Michael
completely put her on
Singer.
the spot here.
I'm picturing the front. It's a blue cover with a horse, Chrissy, a horse galloping.
Uh-oh.
Um, Attachment. Why can't I think of the Dave's reading it right now. Living
Um,
Untethered. Living Untethered is a great book. Very simplified understanding of how we cling attached to the thoughts that we are thinking, that sort of thing. So Untethered by Michael Singer. It's my go-to when I just need a quick reminder. Um, I used to carry it always with me when I travel, sort of thing, especially when I go home to Saskatchewan, where I felt triggered often. I would be like, living
there.
untethered. So that would be, yeah, that would definitely be the one that I'd get if I were you.
Marvelous. I'm going to make sure that I get a page going on the motivation, because I know we talk about all these different things that have sparked
Yeah.
in us
We'll
and
put
good reads. So
Eddie's
we'll put
YouTube
Eddie there.
channel on there.
We'll make sure Eddie is top spot. Like,
Right?
what's funny is that human, Eddie, is going about the world right now. No idea.
No
He
idea.
has been so heavily talked about this morning. Star of the show,
That's why I
really.
was like, right? That's why I'm like, Eddie, what is your
My motivation maintenance, you're going to be like, fuck this girl with the journal again. But listen, hear me out. Hear me out. So I talk about how I became really aware of, yeah, it was just like this nest ball of anxiety and just different emotions that was residing in my solar plexus. Like if I could describe it, it looked like those dog balls that they'll play with where it's all the different colors and it's just knotted into one thing. And I became acutely aware in the fall that that's something that I've been carrying around for some time and not released the valve, not looked at it. It had been stuffed. And once I did a lot of work paying attention to what was in the body, you can't ignore it anymore. So what I have found really helpful, because as I say, I didn't just let it go. I'm like, this is where the work begins. I basically, like, as if you're undoing a necklace, got a few knots out of it and became aware, but it's not like I unraveled the whole thing. And so I actually will self audit like the how am I feeling in my body and actually write it down. And I feel like even if it's something you say out loud and don't want to write down, it's actually incredibly useful to take that moment to identify, because you have no choice but to take, even if it's a minute, to just quietly stand and listen to what am I feeling, where am I feeling, and get curious about it and actually write it down. Uh, it's just going to help you continue to pay attention to those cues.
Mhm,
Because your body's
mhm.
trying to speak to you. Your body's trying to speak to you. And in my case, I hadn't listened to it in a really long time. So all of a sudden it was shouting. And now we can have pleasantry and conversation, you know?
Never friends.
Like, hey, you might want to look at this.
Yeah. Also, great news. His name is Eddie Pinero.
Yes.
So we've identified. He's his channel, I would highly, highly, highly recommend. Eddie, and then Pinero is Pinero. I would highly recommend if you're looking for anything that to listen to in the morning throughout your day. It's a great one to like put in any of his videos. You don't have to watch them. He just talks into a microphone most of the time. It's just mainly the listening. But I find he is a great one to help
Uh-uh.
you with your thoughts when you need a little bit more support or just from daily reminders. That's all.
Yes, Eddie.
Eddie.
Uh, what is your fuel stop? Little quote.
Let's say here. Let's say here. Sometimes our stop doing list needs to be bigger than our to do list. By Patty Dye.
Love it. I'm going to reverse back into motivation maintenance for one hot second before mine.
Let's go there. There we go.
This one's so fucking simple, but it's just funny because I'm somebody that has a lot of things in my calendar. Turn off those stupid notifications on as many apps that you
Yes.
don't need on your phone,
But why? But why are people? Why would you want that? Ding, ding, ding,
right?
ding,
The
ding.
push notifications,
Pavlov's
turn it
dog
off. Yes, it is
situation.
designed to lure you in. It's funny because mine was just about a doctor's appointment, which there's merit to that. I need my calendar reminders, but I had just downloaded a different app for work and didn't realize I hadn't hit that notification setting. And I remember by the end of the day, I was like, Jesus, like so frustrated because I hadn't clued in
Yes.
yet. Right. So it's just like bing, bing. And then later I was like, why the fuck is this happening? And got rid of it. But if you are somebody that has especially social media push notifications on, you will survive. If you don't see who liked your post in that moment, you will survive if it's not suggesting something to you. I promise you, if there's just one thing that you do to help your life today, that is it. So, you know,
Yes.
motorcycles don't have a reverse gear. Well, mine
No, I was
doesn't
gonna say
anyways, but
that. I
I
was gonna
just
say I
straddled my
pushed
bike
her.
and walked the
Yeah, I was
legs.
gonna
You
say,
pushed
yeah.
me
I pushed you from the
and we
front. You
went
just went all
back.
back. And also,
And
a little thing
now,
about the ding ding da ding dings is that the reason why they have that is for your dopamine hits because you're like, ooh,
oh yeah.
socialization. But here's the thing, it's actually stealing joy from you because it's false dopamine. Because what you're, even though you're getting it for that split, it's not false dopamine. What it is though, is that you end up needing more and more and more to reach those dopamine highs. Not like serotonin, which is actual connection and all the things. You can't ever just hit the limit of that. But what you're doing is when you do something that you would actually enjoy with dopamine, it doesn't land because you used all that up on stupid social media dings and all the things.
Yeah.
So it's actually robbing you of the dopamine hits that are worthwhile. because they don't land, because you've used your tolerance is now up because of the ding, the ding, the ding, 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 ding.
Does getting robbed sound fun? No, don't do it to yourself. There you go. That should be my quote. But it's not. It is by James Barras. We'll never know. Maybe we will. Mindfulness is simply being aware of what is happening right now without wishing it were different. Enjoying the pleasant without holding on when it changes, which it will. Being with the unpleasant without fearing it will always be this way, which it won't. Good old James.
Thank you, James. And thank you, Eddie, for being our guest today. Well, folks, that is your motivation.
You've just listened to the Motivation Podcast with your host, Chrissy Van, and me, Lori Joy Kingwell.
Thanks for joining us along the ride. We've got new episodes dropping every Monday, and we're all about community. So follow us on Instagram at Motivation Podcast and visit our website at themotivation.com.
And in the meantime, tanks full and full throttle.